The afternoon sun bathed the university lawn in warm gold as my son Ethan crossed the stage, diploma in hand, his smile wide and proud under the black cap. I sat in the third row, clutching the program, Michael's steady hand on my knee, when the side gate of the pavilion creaked open. There he was, Richard, walking straight toward our section in a suit that strained at the shoulders, carrying a small gift box wrapped in silver paper, as if he belonged in this moment. The man who had left me vomiting from chemotherapy 5 years earlier now stood 20 yards away, scanning the crowd until his eyes locked on mine. My stomach tightened, but I didn't look away. Not this time. He had timed it perfectly, arriving just as the ceremony ended, and families spilled onto the grass for photos and congratulations. Parents laughed, graduates hugged, and the scent of fresh-cut grass mixed with blooming lilacs drifted on the breeze. I felt the familiar weight of old pain rise in my chest, but something else rose with it, clarity cold and sharp. This wasn't a father showing up for his son. This was a man who smelled opportunity. I stayed seated longer than most women in my position would have. I watched Ethan shake hands with his professors, wave at us, and descend the steps with that confident stride he'd earned through late nights and hard choices. Only when the crowd began to thin toward the reception tent did Richard make his move. He approached me near the old oak tree at the edge of the lawn, its leaves rustling softly overhead. The air carried notes of barbecue from nearby grills and sweet punch from the tables. Michael stayed close but gave me space, sensing the shift in my posture. "Laura," Richard said, his voice attempting warmth that didn't reach his eyes. "You look well. Really well. Cancer's been gone a long time now, hasn't it?" He extended the gift box slightly as if it could bridge 5 years of silence. Up close, I noticed the new lines around his mouth, the slight paunch pressing against his shirt buttons, and the faint scent of the same cologne he'd worn during our marriage, now mixed with something sharper like stress or cheap whiskey. I didn't take the box. "What are you doing here, Richard?" He glanced around, checking who might be listening. A few of Ethan's friends milled nearby, laughing and taking photos. "I came for Ethan. He's my son, too." 24 years of marriage, and you think I'd miss something this big?" His tone carried that old reasonable edge, the one he used when he wanted to make selfish choices sound logical. "We should talk. As a family." Michael stepped forward, then calm but solid, his presence a quiet anchor. Rachel, my oldest friend, appeared at my other side with 2 cups of punch, her eyes narrowing at Richard like she'd spotted a snake in the garden. The conversation moved away from the main crowd toward the shade of the oak where the noise softened. Birds called overhead, and a light breeze tugged at the hem of my navy dress. Richard's face hardened as he dropped the pleasantries. "Look, things haven't been easy on my end. The business with Elena, it's hit some rough patches. Investments went south. I need to stabilize. Ohio law recognizes what we built together over those years. I'm entitled to half the assets, the house equity. Retirement, the savings you've accumulated since. It's only fair after everything." He pulled folded papers from his inside jacket pocket, waving them lightly. "I didn't want it to come to this, but if we can't settle privately, we'll have to revisit the divorce settlement. Emotional duress back then, you understand. Courts look at the full picture." I listened without interrupting, feeling the sun warm my shoulders and the rough bark of the oak against my palm as I rested one hand on the trunk. 5 years ago, I would have crumbled, begged for peace, or raged until my voice broke. Today, at 52, with a life rebuilt brick by careful brick, I felt only a deep, settled calm. When he finished, I met his gaze directly. "You have 5 minutes to leave these grounds, Richard." He blinked, the confident smirk faltering. "You're joking. After all we've been through, Ethan deserves to have both parents here. Don't make a scene at your own son's graduation." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The clock is running. 4 minutes and 50 seconds. Security guards in dark uniforms began drifting closer, alerted by the subtle tension. Michael stood ready but silent, letting me lead. Rachel crossed her arms, her expression one of quiet steel. Richard's face flushed, a vein visible at his temple. He leaned in, lowering his voice. You always were dramatic, Laura. This isn't over. I'll see you in court if I have to. As he turned to leave, still clutching that ridiculous gift box, I watched him walk away, the same man who once packed a suitcase while I clung to the bathroom sink. The breeze carried away the last trace of his cologne. Around us, graduates tossed their caps into the air, laughter rising like sparks. Ethan caught my eye from across the lawn and smiled, unaware for now. This day still belonged to him. In that moment, standing under the oak with the weight of decades behind me, I understood something profound. The woman he left in that cold bathroom no longer existed. She had become someone stronger, quieter, and far less willing to shrink. The memory didn't hit me all at once under that oak tree. It settled in slowly, like the chill that creeps under your skin on an October evening. 5.5 years earlier, our house in suburban Ohio still smelled of the lavender candle I kept on the bathroom counter to mask the metallic scent of illness. I was 47, teaching juniors about The Great Gatsby by day, and fighting stage 2 breast cancer by night. The surgery had taken one breast. The chemo was taking everything else. Richard and I had been married 24 years. We raised Ethan together, paid off the house, survived the usual arguments about money and in-laws. I thought we were solid in the way middle-aged couples become comfortable, if not passionate. The day I told him about the diagnosis, he sat at our kitchen table with a glass of iced tea, fingers tapping the side. "We'll get through this," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes had already begun to drift. Treatments blurred into one long haze of sterile rooms and fluorescent lights. I lost my hair in clumps that stuck to the shower drain. My energy drained so completely that some afternoons I graded papers from bed-red pen slipping from weak fingers. Ethan, then 18 and finishing high school, learned to cook simple meals and helped me to the car for appointments. Richard's absences grew longer. Business trips, he called them. Late client dinners. I wanted to believe him. The night he left started like so many others. Rain tapped against the windows in a steady rhythm, the kind that makes the world feel smaller. I had just finished another round of chemo that afternoon and could barely keep water down. Around 2 a.m, I sat on the cold tile floor of the master bathroom, a plastic basin beside me, sweat cooling on my scalp where hair used to be. The mirror reflected a woman I hardly recognized, hollow cheeks, shadowed eyes. The faint scar from surgery visible where my robe slipped. The door opened. Richard stood there, fully dressed, suitcase in hand. The wheels made a soft click on the threshold. He wouldn't meet my eyes in the mirror. "Laura, I can't do this anymore." The words landed flat, without drama or raised voices. Just a statement, clean and final, like announcing he was canceling a magazine subscription. I gripped the edge of the bathtub, the porcelain cool under my palm. "What do you mean?" He shifted his weight. "I met someone. Elena. She understands where I'm at. I need to feel alive again. This house, the sickness, the constant appointments, it's too much. I've been unhappy for a long time." The rain continued outside, indifferent. I could smell the faint trace of his aftershave, the same one he'd worn on our wedding day. "You're leaving me while I'm like this." My voice came out hoarse, smaller than I wanted. "Ethan is still home. The bills." He cut me off gently, almost kindly, which somehow made it worse. "You're strong, Laura. Stronger than you think. The lawyers will sort the rest. I've already spoken to one." He paused at the doorway, suitcase handle creaking in his grip. "I deserve happiness too. We both do." Then he was gone. The front door clicked shut behind him. I stayed on the bathroom floor until the sky lightened to gray, listening to the rain ease into a drizzle. The house felt suddenly enormous and empty, every creak of the settling foundation loud in the silence. The weeks that followed tested every limit I had. Divorce papers arrived while I was midway through radiation, the language clinical and sharp. Richard's lawyer pushed hard, painting me as emotionally unstable due to the cancer, suggesting my judgment couldn't be trusted with assets. Ethan watched his father's departure with quiet anger that aged him overnight. He deferred his first semester of college to stay and help working evenings at a local warehouse so we could keep the lights on. Rachel showed up one Saturday unannounced, her old SUV packed with groceries and cleaning supplies. She had been my friend since our 20s, the one who never needed an invitation. "I'm moving in for a while," she announced, rolling up her sleeves. No arguments. She cooked chicken soup that actually stayed down, drove me to treatments when my hands shook too much to steer, and sat with me on the porch during sleepless nights. Her presence was a steady anchor in the storm. Michael entered our lives more quietly. He was another English teacher at my high school, the kind who coached debate club and always stayed late to help struggling students. At first, he simply left casseroles on the porch with a note, "No need to reply. Just heat and eat." Later, he helped Ethan fix the garage door that had been sticking for months. He never pushed, never tried to play hero. He simply showed up week after week, with the kind of reliability that felt revolutionary after Richard's exit. Those months stripped away every illusion I had carried about marriage and fairness. I learned how quickly shared history could be rewritten when one person decided to leave. Richard married Elena 8 months after our divorce finalized. Their honeymoon photos appeared on social media while I sat in a sterile room waiting for scan results. The contrast burned, but it also forged something harder in me. By the time my hair began growing back curlier and grayer than before, I had started making decisions that were entirely mine. I sold the big house with its echoing rooms and bought a smaller place with a sunny kitchen and a garden I could manage. I kept teaching because the classroom gave me purpose when everything else felt uncertain. Ethan watched me rebuild, and in doing so learned what resilience actually looked like. Standing under that oak tree 5 years later, watching Richard walk away once again, I felt the full circle of it all. The woman he left on that bathroom floor had clawed her way back to solid ground. She had scars, yes, but they no longer defined her. They simply reminded her what she was no longer willing to tolerate. The months after Richard walked out were a masterclass in survival. I returned to the classroom thinner and quieter, but the familiar rhythm of lesson plans and student essays gave me something solid to hold on to. Each morning I stood before 30 teenagers and spoke about literature with a voice that grew steadier over time. My students never knew how much those 50-minute periods anchored me, when my energy flagged. I sat on the edge of my desk and let them debate To Kill a Mockingbird while I caught my breath. Teaching reminded me that I still had value beyond being someone's wife. Money was tighter than I had ever imagined. The divorce settlement left me with the house but most of the medical debt. I sold the large colonial we had raised Ethan in and moved into a modest ranch-style home 2 streets over. The new place had a smaller kitchen that caught morning light through wide windows and a backyard just big enough for a vegetable garden. I remember the smell of fresh paint the weekend Rachel and I rolled it onto the walls together, soft beige that felt like a fresh start. Ethan helped carry boxes, his young shoulders bearing more responsibility than any 18-year-old should. He deferred college for a year, working nights at a warehouse, coming home with grease on his hands and quiet determination in his eyes. We ate simple dinners at the small table and talked about the future instead of the past. Rachel became a permanent fixture during the hardest stretches. She would arrive after work with bags of groceries, humming off-key while chopping vegetables. One evening, as autumn leaves gathered on the porch, she found me staring at old wedding photos I hadn't yet packed away. Without a word, she took the box from my hands and set it in the garage. "Those don't belong in your new chapters," she said simply. Her friendship wasn't loud declarations, it was showing up with soup on bad days and sitting in silence when words felt too heavy. Michael's presence grew gradually, like the steady growth of the tomato plants I tended in the backyard. He never tried to replace Richard or rush anything. At first it was practical help fixing the leaky faucet, reviewing Ethan's scholarship applications, bringing extra firewood when winter hit hard. His voice was low, and even the kind that made problems feel manageable. One spring afternoon, while I was still recovering from radiation fatigue, he found me struggling to turn the soil in the garden. He knelt beside me without being asked, his hands working the earth alongside mine. The scent of damp soil and early lilacs filled the air as we worked in comfortable silence. Later, over iced tea on the porch, he listened as I spoke about the fear that still lingered some nights. He didn't offer quick fixes or tell me to move on. He simply said, "You're already moving forward, Laura. I see it every day." Our relationship deepened slowly and honestly. 2 years after the divorce, we began seeing each other more intentionally. 3 years in, we married quietly in our backyard under strings of simple lights. Only 20 people attended Rachel as my maid of honor Ethan walking me across the grass, a few close colleagues and neighbors. No elaborate dress, no grand gestures, just honest vows spoken as the sun set behind the maple trees. Michael's hand was warm and certain in mine. For the first time in years, I felt safe in partnership rather than abandoned in marriage. I started writing again during quiet evenings. Short essays, at first reflections on teaching through illness, on what it means to rebuild at 50, on learning to trust your own strength. I posted them on a simple blog with no expectations. Readers found me. Women in their 40s and 50s wrote back sharing their own stories of betrayal, illness, and starting over. The small income from the blog and occasional speaking invitations at local women's groups helped chip away at remaining debts. More importantly, it gave me a voice I had never fully claimed during my marriage. My body changed too. Hair grew back darker and curlier, a visible reminder that life continues in unexpected ways. At 50, I completed my first 5K, crossing the finish line sweaty and triumphant, with Michael and Ethan cheering at the end. The medal hung in our hallway, not as a trophy but as proof I could set goals and reach them on my own terms. I learned to say no without guilt to requests, to old patterns, to anyone who wanted pieces of me I could no longer afford to give. Ethan thrived, despite everything. He started college the following year, studying engineering with the same quiet focus he had shown at home. Watching him walk confidently across campus during family weekends filled me with a deep, grounding pride. He had seen the worst of life early and chosen not to let it define him. Our relationship grew stronger in the spaces Richard had vacated. By the time Ethan's graduation approached, I stood at 52 with a life that felt authentically mine. The house was nearly paid off. Retirement accounts were growing again. Most evenings, Michael and I sat on the porch with coffee, talking about books or garden plans or nothing at all. The peace wasn't flashy, but it was real, earned through small, consistent choices when no one was watching. That's why when Richard appeared under the oak tree with his demands and old entitlement, I could look at him without crumbling. The woman he left on the bathroom floor had built something solid. She had scars, but they had toughened into quiet armor. She had learned that survival turns into strength when you stop waiting for someone else to save you. The shade beneath the old oak felt cooler as the afternoon sun dipped slightly, casting longer shadows across the university lawn. Laughter and cheerful conversations drifted from the reception tent, where graduates posed for photos with their families. The air carried the sweet scent of punch mixed with grilled food from the caterers and the faint earthiness of trampled grass. Richard stood before me, his face tightening as my words landed. The silver gift box remained clutched in his left hand like a prop he refused to abandon. "You have 5 minutes to leave these grounds, Richard." I repeated, my voice even and low. I felt Michael's quiet presence just behind my right shoulder and caught Rachel's steady gaze from a few steps away. No raised voices yet. No scene. Just a clear boundary drawn on a day that belonged to our son. Richard let out a short, disbelieving laugh that didn't reach his eyes. 5 minutes, Laura. This is ridiculous. We're adults. Ethan is 23 years old. He deserves both his parents here on a day like this. He gestured with the papers he had pulled from his jacket, the pages fluttering slightly in the breeze. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for what's fair. 24 years of marriage. We built that life together. The equity in the house you kept. The retirement accounts that grew while I was starting over. Ohio law is clear on long-term marriages. Half is half." I studied his face, the familiar jawline now softened by age, the slight redness creeping up his neck. A light wind rustled the oak leaves above us, sending a few spiraling down. Nearby, a group of graduates cheered as someone popped a bottle of sparkling cider. The joyful sounds felt distant, like they belonged to another world. "I didn't come here to fight," he continued, lowering his voice as if sharing a confidence. "Elena and I hit some rough patches. Bad investments. The market turned. I just need help stabilizing. We can settle this privately, keep it out of court. Think about Ethan. Dragging this out would only hurt him." The mention of our son sharpened everything. I glanced across the lawn and saw Ethan laughing with friends, his cap tilted back, completely unaware of the tension gathering under this tree. The thought of him being pulled into this on his graduation day sent a protective heat through my chest, but I kept my posture relaxed, one hand resting lightly against the rough bark for grounding. Michael spoke for the first time, his tone calm and measured. "Richard, this isn't the place. Laura asked you to leave. Respect that." Richard's eyes flicked to Michael with clear disdain. "This is between me and my wife, my ex-wife. Stay out of it." He took a half step closer to me. "You always did like playing the victim, Laura. Cancer or no cancer, you knew how to make everything about you. But I carried us for years. Now it's your turn to be reasonable." I felt the old sting, but it no longer burned the way it once had. Instead, it clarified. "Reasonable," I said quietly, would have been staying when I was too weak to stand. Reasonable would have been not packing a suitcase while I sat on the bathroom floor. "You made your choices then. These are mine now. 3 minutes left." His face flushed deeper. He raised his voice just enough for nearby guests to glance over. "You're really going to do this here? Embarrass me in front of everyone? I have rights. I'll take you back to court." Emotional duress during the divorce, hidden assets. Judges look at the full picture. Don't make me involve Ethan in this. The threat landed exactly where he intended, but instead of fear, I felt a deep, unyielding resolve settle over me. Rachel moved closer, her shoulder brushing mine in silent solidarity. A couple of Ethan's professors paused their conversation, sensing the shift in atmosphere. The graduation music had faded, replaced by the casual chatter of families packing up chairs. Richard made his mistake then. He turned and started walking toward Ethan, gift box still in hand, calling out, "Son, come here a minute. Your old man wants to congratulate you properly." I moved without thinking, stepping directly into his path. My hand came up, not striking but firmly stopping his forward motion. "Do not take another step toward him." He stopped, surprised by the steel in my posture. Up close I could see the fine sweat on his forehead and smell the mix of cologne and nervous tension. "Laura, get out of my way. This is absurd." Security guards in dark polo shirts had begun walking purposefully in our direction, radios crackling. Michael stood beside me now, solid and unflinching. Rachel positioned herself so she could see Ethan, clearly ready to redirect if needed. I kept my eyes on Richard. "You had 5 years to be a father. You chose not to. This day is his, not yours. Leave. Now." His expression twisted. "You think you're better than me because you rebuilt. Because some other man plays house with you. I made you who you are. Without me, you would have fallen apart." He gestured sharply with the papers. "This isn't over. I'll see you in court. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you really are." The guards reached us. One spoke politely but firmly. "Sir, I need you to come with us. This is a private event." Richard looked around, realizing the small crowd of witnesses, parents, professors, friends who had turned their attention our way. His shoulders stiffened in that familiar way when his pride was wounded. He jerked his arm away from the guard's light touch, glaring at me one final time. "You'll regret this, Laura, humiliating me like this. We'll see how strong you are when the lawyers start digging." He turned and walked away, strides stiff, the silver gift box swinging uselessly at his side. The guards escorted him toward the parking area. I stood there under the oak, feeling the breeze cool the warmth on my face. My heart beat steadily, not racing. Michael's hand found the small of my back, gentle, supportive, wordless. Rachel exhaled slowly and muttered, "Good riddance." Across the lawn, Ethan caught my eye again and raised his diploma with a proud grin. I smiled back, waving as if nothing had disrupted the perfect afternoon. The sun continued its slow descent, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Laughter rose once more from the tent. Life moved forward as it always does, even after old ghosts try to intrude. In that moment, I understood with complete certainty that the woman I had become was no longer negotiable. Not by Richard, not by fear, not by anyone. 2 weeks after the graduation, the envelope arrived in our mailbox on a quiet Tuesday morning. The return address belonged to a law firm in downtown Columbus. I stood in the kitchen with the letter in my hand, the scent of fresh coffee still lingering from breakfast as sunlight streamed through the window above the sink. Michael watched me from the table, his expression calm but alert. I didn't need to open it to know what it contained. Some instincts sharpened by years of disappointment. Rarely fail you. Richard was suing. He claimed the original divorce settlement had been unfair due to my compromised emotional state during cancer treatment. He wanted a larger share of the house equity, my retirement contributions, and even a portion of the modest savings I had rebuilt through teaching and writing. The language in the documents was polished and bloodless, designed to sound reasonable while implying I had somehow taken advantage of him. I read it twice at the kitchen counter. Feeling the smooth paper between my fingers, then folded it neatly and placed it beside the toaster. We met with Diane, a sharp family law attorney recommended by a colleague at school. Her office smelled of lemon polish and fresh files. She listened without interrupting as I walked her through the timeline, her pen moving steadily across a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back and said simply, "This is weak. Emotionally manipulative, but weak on facts. We'll build a wall he can't climb." The next 3 weeks turned our dining room into a quiet command center. We gathered medical records from the hospital, thick folders documenting every chemotherapy session, surgery note, and radiation mark. Rachel provided a detailed statement about the months she lived with us, describing how Richard had already moved out while I was still undergoing treatment. Michael offered his own account of the support he had witnessed. Ethan wrote a short, factual letter about the year he had deferred college to help keep our household afloat. I added bank statements showing the medical debt I had carried alone and screenshots of Richard's social media posts from Hawaii during my recovery period. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast long shadows across the dining table covered in documents, I sat back and rubbed my temples. The weight felt heavy but manageable. Diane reviewed everything with quiet efficiency. "We have abandonment during serious illness," she said. "We have clear proof of his new life starting immediately after he left. Judges don't look kindly on this pattern." I made the decision to post on my Facebook page on a Thursday night. Not a rant, not a public attack, just the truth written carefully at the kitchen table, while Michael sat across from me offering quiet encouragement. I described the facts: my ex-husband showing up uninvited at our son's graduation, demanding half my assets after leaving during my cancer battle, and now pursuing legal action. I kept Ethan's name and details protected. No insults, no exaggeration. I simply closed with, "Some doors stay closed for good reason. Peace is worth protecting." The response surprised me in its depth. Messages poured in from women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, teachers I knew, neighbors, former students' mothers, even women I hadn't spoken to in years. Many shared their own stories of betrayal in the second half of life. Support felt tangible, like a steady hand on my shoulder. But there was backlash, too. A few mutual acquaintances from our old life sided with Richard, calling my post vindictive. One of his cousins messaged me asking me to take it down for the sake of family peace. I left the post up. The truth no longer needed anyone's permission. Richard's world began to shift. Word traveled through our old suburban circles. Former colleagues distanced themselves. His business partners asked questions. Then came the most unexpected development. Elena reached out to me through a private message one rainy afternoon. Her words were brief and careful. She had known the marriage was strained, but had not understood the full extent of what happened during my illness. 2 weeks later, she left him. The court hearing was scheduled for late summer. In the weeks leading up, Richard's calls started first from unknown numbers, then voicemails alternating between anger and attempts at reconciliation. I saved everyone. Diane used them effectively. In the courtroom, with its polished wood and quiet hum of fluorescent lights, the judge reviewed the evidence with a neutral expression. Richard sat across the room, looking smaller in his suit. His usual confidence dimmed under the weight of documentation. The ruling came faster than expected. The case was dismissed. The original settlement stood. Richard was ordered to cover a portion of my legal fees. As we left the courthouse into the bright afternoon light with the distant sound of traffic and the smell of warm asphalt, I felt no triumphant rush, just a deep, quiet exhale. The chapter had finally closed. Richard sent one last message a few days later. It was short, bitter, claiming I had turned everyone against him. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Through it all, Ethan remained focused on his new job and future plans. He knew enough to understand his father had crossed a line, but we protected him from the ugliest details. Michael stayed steady as ever, reminding me with small gestures, fresh flowers on the counter, a shared evening walk, that some foundations remain strong no matter what storms return. I had entered this fight not as the sick, abandoned woman from that bathroom floor, but as someone who had rebuilt with intention. The battle cost time and energy I would rather have spent in the garden or with family, yet it confirmed what I already knew. Boundaries drawn in strength are rarely regretted. The leaves on the maple tree in our backyard had just begun turning gold when the final court documents arrived, confirming the case was closed. I stood on the porch holding the envelope, the late summer air warm against my skin, and carrying the faint scent of blooming chrysanthemums from the garden beds Michael and I had planted together. For the first time in months, the quiet around me felt like peace instead of waiting. No more unknown numbers lighting up my phone. No more carefully worded letters from lawyers. Just the ordinary sounds of suburban life, a neighbor mowing their lawn 2 houses down, birds calling from the oak trees, and the distant laughter of children playing at the end of the street. At 52, I have come to understand that peace in the second half of life is not something handed to you. It is built carefully, protected fiercely, and earned through choices that younger versions of yourself might have found impossible. Our home is not large, but it feels like ours in every detail. The kitchen table where Ethan once did homework now hosts quiet dinners with Michael. Conversations that drift easily from books we're reading to plans for a trip to Italy we've promised ourselves. The garden I started in those difficult years has grown abundant tomatoes heavy on the vine herbs that scent the air when brushed against. These small things matter deeply now. They are proof that life can become gentle again after great rupture. Ethan started his first professional job last month. I watched him adjust his tie in the hallway mirror on his first day, the same determined expression he wore when he helped carry boxes into our smaller house years ago. He has grown into a thoughtful, steady young man who understands that reliability is a form of love. He rarely speaks of his father anymore, and when he does, it is without bitterness, only acceptance that some chapters end so better ones can begin. That knowledge brings me more comfort than any court victory ever could. Michael and I have settled into a rhythm that feels both comfortable and alive. He still leaves me notes on the counter before leaving for work. I still make his favorite coffee on weekend mornings. We walk the neighborhood most evenings, as the sky softens into dusk, talking about everything and nothing. There is no performance in our marriage, only the deep satisfaction of choosing each other every single day, after knowing what it feels like to be left at your lowest. This kind of steady presence becomes something sacred. Richard has grown quieter in the months since the ruling. I hear through distant mutual connections that his life has grown smaller. Elena's departure left its mark. Some former friends have drifted away. He sent one final message months ago, not an apology, but a statement claiming he hoped I would find it in my heart to forgive. I read it once, then deleted it. Forgiveness does not always mean reopening the door. Sometimes it simply means refusing to carry someone else's consequences any longer. Looking back, I no longer see myself as the woman abandoned on that cold bathroom floor. That version of me was real and she suffered deeply, but she did not disappear. She transformed. She learned that strength in the second half of life often looks like calm refusal rather than dramatic confrontation. It looks like protecting your child's graduation day. It looks like gathering evidence instead of tears. It looks like choosing peace over guilt when every old instinct tells you to shrink so others can stay comfortable. The greatest lesson these years have taught me is this: you are allowed to close doors that were slammed in your face when you needed them most. You are allowed to keep the life you rebuilt after someone tried to take it apart. Blood marriage certificates and shared history do not grant unlimited access to your peace, your assets, or your future. At this stage of life, time becomes too precious to spend it carrying old weights that were never truly yours to bear. I think often now about the legacy I want to leave Ethan. Not money or property, though I have worked hard to secure both. I want him to remember that his mother learned to stand firm when it mattered, that she protected her home, her health, and her heart without apology, that she showed him what it means to build a life rooted in respect rather than fear or obligation. As the evenings grow cooler and we prepare for the coming autumn, I find myself grateful in a way I could not have imagined 5 years ago. Not because the pain never happened, but because it no longer controls the story. The woman I am today walks lighter, loves more wisely, and understands that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to go backward. If my story resonates with you, especially if you are a woman navigating the second half of life after betrayal, loss, or reinvention, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what boundary have you had to draw to protect your peace? Where are you watching from right now, and what chapter are you currently writing in your own life? Your stories matter. They remind all of us that we are not alone in choosing strength over familiarity. We have many more honest conversations like this one waiting to be shared. If this story moved you, touched something in your own journey, or gave you the courage to hold your line a little firmer, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Together we can keep reminding each other that it is never too late to choose yourself with clarity and grace. Thank you for spending this time with me. Here's to building lives that no one can casually walk away from or walk back into ever again.